Okay, all set.
So I'm calling the Southborough Select Board meeting to order on July 7th, 2022. The purpose of this meeting is solely to plan our goals for fiscal year 23. We will not be taking public comment at all tonight. So to help the public understand what we've done to get here tonight, we have hired a consultant with a lot of experience in municipal organization to help us end up tonight with a viable, achievable set of goals for next year, so short term. We've all met with Mr. Heckenbecker individually, and we've put together our goals. He has received those goals, and he has come back with a spreadsheet that has ranked those goals for us in different categories. So tonight, we're going to start from there, and we're going to end up with an agreement on what goals we believe we can achieve and what to achieve for next year. So over to Pete.
Thank you. By all means, call me Pete. We had a very nice discussion with each of you individually. I appreciate your time, not only for that, but also for responding to sometimes multiple emails and getting all the information from you and then to. So I appreciate that and thank you for that. And I apologize for not getting the grid back to you till this morning, but we got everything together and I think a fairly good document. I just tell you a little bit about myself, and one of the reasons why I want to be in the center view and walk around. The fact that I'm just itchy, but I also have a hearing disability, so I may stand up right in front of you with your face, and so I can do a combination of lip reading and actual hearing. And to top that, I also have vision disability, so all the typos that you see, including we have one raider who's a tater instead of a raider, I will blame at least on my vision. A little bit of a challenge looking at that grid and doing it in large font. So I do the best I can, and I think hopefully we'll have a good discussion, a good document. The discussions with you were very helpful. The purpose is not for me to become expert in Southborough, because I can't top you. You've got people who have lived here all their lives. I think the newest person in town is 9 years here or something. And obviously you've been involved in your local government and your community in a whole lot of ways. So that's not the purpose of it. The purpose really is to try to get from you more candid view of answers to a whole lot of questions that I asked. I asked all of you the same questions, and I made copious notes for my own purposes that are only for my own purposes. And I promise you I wouldn't quote any of you, and I won't. But it was certainly very helpful for me to understand sort of the current landscape of Southborough, what's going on now, what the issues are, and beyond that, obviously, you responded in your as they were setting up the technology, and I saw on the screen Southborough 1727. Can you imagine what people would think 1727 if they stopped in this room right now? I mean, what's an owl? That's not an owl. It's truly remarkable. And I think it just helps you reflect on what we've been through as a society, and what every community in this country and this world has been through over the last 2 years, and the really remarkable accomplishment of having been able to provide services to the community, have your meetings, do your business that you need to do, get the streets plowed, schools taught, all of the other things that we do as local government. And I congratulate you all, and Mark and his team, because it really is a remarkable accomplishment. And then we're in this building that I understand just opened right before COVID. This also is a remarkable accomplishment. So there's some really good things, some remarkable things that Southborough has been able to do. And what I hope we'll do together is define what some of those things are for the future, and help you address those issues. So the goal setting principles, the goals are for the town of Reading, Reading. That came out easily. The town of Southborough as set by the select board as CEOs. You are the CEOs of the community. I know you have a lot of elected boards, but this is the group that sets the priorities and sets the policies for the community. So that's what these goals are. They're goals set by the entire board of the town of Southborough. So it's not like, one person is setting one goal. You all gave me what you thought the goals might be, and we went through a rating process. And ultimately, it is a consensus of the board as to what your goals will be. The goal horizon is 1 year. So this is for 2023. There are things that are on your list that you will not accomplish during that time, but you may start them. I think with a successful process here, the community might want to consider doing some broader strategic planning. And in fact, I think you've indicated in some of your goals that in some areas, that's some of what you might be interested in doing. The goal should be SMART. I talked to each of you about whether that's something that you understand. SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. I took your goals that you all had submitted. I didn't give a SMART analysis of them. So whether they're smart or not, you're going to determine that, I think. One of the things that you need to understand in goal setting, particularly in local government, is you can sit here on July 7th, 2022 and lay out your goals. I will guarantee you by September 30th, there will be something that comes up, something happens that isn't even on anybody's list. So you all need to understand that you do need to be flexible in terms of administration, but it's still worthwhile to try to set goals for the year. To the extent possible and within the our time limit, I will also have some observations on meetings and perhaps some suggestions on meetings and some general observations. If we don't get to those verbally tonight, then I will submit them in writing. Next slide. So this is roughly the process. Background information, you were it. You all, Mark when he came back, and Vanessa, plus reading material that Vanessa sent me, some past minutes, the master plan. I didn't read all the master plan, but I read some of the sort of highlights of it. So the background information, the select board submitted a potential list of goals independently. So as far as I know, you all didn't talk among yourselves, and we've got about 75 goals from the board members individually. Then I developed a composite list of goals, and basically I did two things. I looked for duplication or similarity and just combined. And I observed where there seemed to be some categories that naturally came out of your goals. So that some of those may be categories you're familiar with, some may not be, but they sort of naturally flowed out of what you all submitted as goals. The select board then ranked the goals on a rating of 1 to 5, and from that I then sorted the list. So you have and you received this morning, and we'll have the slides that show what the priority list from your consensus is. But that's just a mathematical process. The main thing we want to do tonight is to confirm that those are in fact your 5 highest goals in community development, or if there's something that you feel ought to move up on the list, something that ought to move down on the list, that's for you to decide. So, select board will tonight modify and finalize priority goals. Next steps after that are for the staff to develop an action plan for each. So Mark's gonna need to determine, when you have a list of 25 goals, 28 goals maybe, who the staff person is who's responsible. Most of those will be very natural. You'll understand if it's something with DPW, it'll be the DPW director. If it's finance, it'll be your treasurer finance people. And the board will need to determine who the board liaison to that would be. So each of those goals will have a board member. Hopefully it won't be all the same board member on all 28 goals. It should be the effort should be spread around. And that then should be published on the web page with the goals. And the staff will develop an action plan for each goal in your packet of material. And you'll see it on the slide. There's a proposed action plan form. You can Google action plan for goals and you can see 100 of them. I just took one and modified it for Southborough. So the staff person would fill that out and develop what the action plan is and review that then with their liaison. And that becomes part of the goals, final goal statement. And that should be public. So next slide is actually the action plan. And basically it's to repeat the goal statement at the top and then the action step description, the responsible party, select board liaison, beginning date, end date, resources required, whether it's staff, technology, budget, whatever it might be, desired outcome and notes. And so the idea is with each goal, some of them you may fill out one line. It may be, do X. But for others that are more complex, you may in fact wind up using a whole sheet. So that's why staff does that, reviews with liaison, with the selectmen liaisons, select board liaison, and then moves forward with that. So our next sheet is to show the goals.
Too many goals to fit on the screen. Need a bigger computer.
Ta-da. Maybe while we're getting that sheet out, the 5 categories that things just naturally morphed into were administration and operations. And that was the largest single category. There were 19 separate items there. Community development, I don't know whether that's a term that's used in Southborough or not, but the, sort of the planning, housing, kinds of thing. Finance, logically, you would expect that there's a fair number of items in finance. HR, which includes board committees and commissions as well as staff, and then trying to get infrastructure, which you sort of naturally expect to see. Okay. So move that up to the top the items. Yeah, scroll. Yeah. first one. That was actually maybe down one line if you can. No, because I need to get 1.1. And hopefully through 1.5. Okay, we'll have to scroll. So this illustrates the process. This is the goal. And what I did was pretty much duplicate what the board member who submitted that goal had proposed. This is the priority by rater. One of you is a tater, but the rest of you are rater. And I left that information. If the board didn't really see it, you can figure out whose was which, but I left that because it's information that I had. The last is a composite score, and the composite score is really the sum of these items divided by 5. So one of the things that was important is the higher the number, the higher the rating. But you don't get to have an unlimited number of 5s. So you only had 5 5s in a category. And so that basically gives us a little bit better control on it. And then when we'll be filling out is the staff liaison, the select board liaison, and target date, and then that flows right into the form that I showed you previously. So I think what we can do is just go through the top items, and then you all have a copy of the whole list. So if there's anything that you feel like you want to move up, then you should make that comment, and if the majority of the board agrees, then that one gets moved up. What I would suggest, though, is you had 19 items in this list. You can't move up 19 items because you can't have 70 goals. It's just not going to work. 25 is a lot of goals, but more manageable. So the first one was basically develop ways of outreach to the public. A lot of you had a lot of things to say about each of your goals, and that was wonderful. And in some cases, I actually took some of those suggestions and actually turned them into goals and made them as goals. But I think when we get through with this process, and probably without attribution to any of the particular members of the board, I would turn those over to Mark, because I think as the action plans are being developed, I think the board on some of those items has given a lot of thought to an action plan. And so there's no sense in losing that. We might as well capture it. So the first item was outreach to the public. Second item is continue efforts to manage IT cybersecurity risk. Third is to update the select board meeting process for improved focus, efficiency, and transparency. And that's what I have some information for you to discuss if we have time for that. Fourth item is to incorporate Americans with Disabilities Act as part of any project going forward. I'm sure there's a story behind that, but I don't need to know that. And then the fifth is to create a policy for annual and fall town meetings. And this is a concept. You obviously have an annual town meeting. It's required by law. Some communities have sort of statutorily or in charter a fall town meeting. Southbridge does not do that, although you have a habit of having fall town meetings, as I understand it. And so the idea is you want to enshrine that in some kind of legal process so that you know that you always have it. So why don't I just stop and open it and see if there are any comments. One of the things that I think is notable is if you look at the composite score, there is a fairly good sized gap from number 5 to number 6. So it does tell you that that's probably a good breaking point among those categories. And you don't need to, by the way, nobody needs to go back and change the vote or anything like that. I mean, it's a consensus process basically. So the question for the board is, you feel comfortable with those in the operations administration area as your 5 goals to work on for this year? Understand that there's nothing that precludes some of the other items from being done by the board now or at any time. For example, I think it's in here that you have meet quarterly with the public works director. If you want to do that, that doesn't require a long action plan. You can just do it. Correct Mark to put that on the agenda for, for once a quarter and it's done. So just because things are lower in the category, in the ranking, doesn't mean that they're lost forever or they're things that you can't consider. It's just that what you're telling yourselves and you're telling staff is, this is the top 5 priorities. That's where we want to spend our resources in this particular area.
Can I just make a general comment overall, not necessarily specific to this, just so the board has information on some of the positions that I have taken throughout this document. When I put a 1 on something, it was because I felt it was something we were already doing or we were in the process of doing. So that's why, in some cases, again, we don't know each other rank things. That's why specifically I rank things as a 1.
But that's not true with every one of them. For example, I don't think that's true with National Grid property.
National Grid property, specific, hold on. No. I do think the board has talked about that, Kathy, and I think we talked about the 21E needs to be done before the board moves forward. So I think that is a step in a process. But certainly, again, that's just so the board knows that was the reason why I had put 1s on certain things, like hiring the new police chief. That's going to happen.
Yeah, I noticed that when I looked at, I was surprised that did because obviously, okay, so that makes
Just,
sense.
I just want the board to understand why I did a 1 on certain.
And I looked at it as like taking an action versus like doing a new initiative / goal. So I think I gave the police chief search a 1 as well. Because we're in the process of doing it, we have a plan and we're gonna execute on it. Looked at it more of an action, new goal.
And then for me, I guess I'm a little bit of a combination. Some of the things I rank for is for that. We love for that same reason. Like that. We're going to select a new police chief. We have to. So I think for that reason, it doesn't need to occupy one of the goals.
Yeah.
Some of them, one, because I just thought my own personal opinion is that it's not as much of a it shouldn't be much of a priority. But there's also a mix of some of the things that I know I put in that are particularly ones that we get to consider. That's really something that it's more of a long-term thing. And I understand that it's maybe not smart, it can't be done in like 1 year measurably, but I do think we should talk about, okay, when in our cycle do we get an opportunity to talk about some of those potential more 5-year things? And I know like on advisory, we often thought of like the summer was a time where you could kick around longer term ideas, and that led to things like the meals tax and things like that, particularly on the revenue side. And so I just want to throw that out there. I mean, it's interesting to see some of the feedback that comes from some of those. And I don't know how we're gonna, I don't know if that means it doesn't get on the list because it can't possibly be done in a year, but.
No, I don't think so, because I think there are some things by the very nature that can't be done in municipal government.
Yeah.
But that, so if you're starting it as the initiative is this year, then it should be on this list. But hiring the police chief is using that as an example. Somebody put that on the list because I didn't make it up. Okay, so somebody thought that was worthy of stating as a goal. And that's fine.
Yep.
You all, you're 5 individuals with, great experience, ties to the community and so forth. And so you come at this obviously with different perspectives. But somebody thought it was important enough to put it on the list, and fine. But yeah, it's gonna happen.
I did, because I think it's so hugely important. So granted, it's
Me
gonna
too.
happen, if you do this as a goal, it still happen,
Yeah.
probably, right?
Yep.
But I still think it's hugely important, and at the end of the year, when we take a look at this and how well we did here, I think it's gonna be an accomplishment we want to recognize, so that's why I did it.
Mhm.
And I hear you, Andrew, as far as long-term, short-term, and I think we need to get to long-term, but in my mind, being the newest person here, there was just a lot of things that need to be taken care of, that could be taken care of short-term, so we start there, and then we'll go to long-term planning. Unfortunately, unlike advisory, I don't think we've got the big window, you know, they focus on the budget and then they breathe, right? And they can start looking at philosophical things for this, or they start budget thinking, right? We don't quite have that break, you know, ours is pretty much action packed around, but I agree, we absolutely need to turn to longer-term goals during this year. But I thought a better way to start is short-term goals, so we can really get started and start checking some of these things off.
I was more absolute in my rankings. As a matter of fact, I was less willing to give credit for things that are in the pipeline. So I tried to figure out what are the things that I would want to focus on as a manager here, even though I think we're underway, as folks pointed out things. But I want to be sure we actually get to the finish line on some of these things. So this is, my rankings were based on where would I spend my attention as a manager, and not that the other things aren't important. I mean, I think there almost nothing here that is not something that would be good to have happen, as a matter of fact. And the challenge is, you know, with 70 goals here, how do you divide your time and resources in ways that make enough of the right things happen? And again, my rankings were trying to determine where I spend my time, whether that they allocate my time or our collective resources. So I think, I guess, a little different, but the real issue for me is I'm happy with this group here. I'm disappointed that my national grid property came so low.
But, you know, just, we don't want to dwell on that too long, right? But it's on our list, right? We will get to it, but we've got some time to get to that one.
I know, but I'm saying that it's hard to go too far wrong here, as a matter of fact. So I'm less concerned about, you know, should number 23 be in the top 5 or not, versus let's find ones that are important that we can get done and figure out a way to make it happen. Because for me, the real issue, my high level issue, is that we got far too many goals. Challenge is how do we get things done efficiently? And we've got resources, we got people, we got money, and we got a management process. People, us, our staff, the town staff, our committees, how do we find ways to make those resources more effective as we move forward? And then, you know, how to get sufficient resources from various places, and finally to create this management process that allows us to make all these things happen in a coordinated way. So that's, you know, a lot of moving parts there. So I'm less concerned, I guess, about the final ones that read here, given that all of these are pretty useful, I think. So I'm more interested in sort of the process and the infrastructure and the management side of things, the implementation and follow-up.
So one of the things that I wondered as I was looking at your ratings, it came in more in the finance area. So maybe we should defer it till we get there. My question or my thought was on increasing the meals tax and increasing the CPA. The people who rated that a 1, did they do that because they don't agree with that? So they don't think the meals tax should be increased? They don't think CPA should be increased? Or did they just say that's not a priority? So it's something to think about, I guess, with any of these goals. Do they disagree with, you know, with the goal statement? Do you you disagree with continuing efforts to manage IT cybersecurity risk?
I think the specific answer to what you just said, meals tax, CPA, depends on who you're talking to. So I was a huge advocate of meals tax. My committee advisory was a huge proponent and pushed it, and very happy there. I just think it's too soon to, you can double, right? I think it's too soon to do it. With the still, if you look, we've gone from 51 entities that pay meals tax down to I think 35 right now. That's the impact it's had on Southborough. So I just think it's too early, even though restaurants don't pay it, to go back and say no, we're going to double. I actually think we should consider it, just not this year. CPA, I'm on the other side. I absolutely think we should consider bring that to the town, and there's reasons for it. We're not discussing tonight, as far as the reasons, but there is reasons behind that.
So, again, people rank for different reasons, obviously, and that's not something that you can or should standardize necessarily. I mean, that's the experience that you all bring as individuals. But, you need to get to this point as a group. What are the goals?
I just said one thing.
Yeah.
I think if anyone has a question, obviously we know who ranked them up. Anybody is welcome to reach out to me at any time. If you have any question on why I ranked something the way I did, I would be more than happy to explain it. I agree, probably shouldn't go through all of that tonight, but anyone, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to explain why I gave something the ranking that I did.
Peter?
Yes.
I thought one thing that was useful was that there seemed to be a lot of consensus on their finance to get some projections, like a 5-year range. I remember a couple of years ago where Valentine came in and had some members warned about potential operational overrides and things like that. I think that getting that type of information, that is useful in prioritizing what goals should be on the list and how much they should be ranked, because some of the goals obviously they involve staffing, and it's something we consider very, very seriously. Like it's anytime considering FTE, having an FTE. So I was encouraged to see that as a goal, get some early in the cycle, some projections about fiscal impact, and be also kind of post-COVID.
But seemed in the finance area particularly, there were two things that were sort of longer range. That was one of them, and the other one was in capital plan. Both are good things, and both are sort of part of what you're looking at when you're dealing with strategic planning. I mean, this is goal setting, it's 1 year. Strategic planning is more than 5-year horizon is usually a good one in local government. I'm sure your finance director and Mark cautioned you that projections in municipal governments are not something to be taken to the bank, because so many things can change so quickly and have a direct effect on how we do what we do.
I'd follow up on that. I guess I have a little different view as one who used to be in the forecasting business. I think accuracy is questionable. I'm not on myself. I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time on it. I think we do it, but I think it's a shorter term kind of deal. I think the capital planning is very, very important longer term in terms of where we're going to spend capital resources. That's a big
Well,
impact on that.
Capital planning is really important, I think,
Yeah.
and I guess my experience is that 10-year capital plans for local government are reasonable and realistic, and they're valuable in that when you're looking at financing capital projects, if you're going to sell bonds for them, you have to for some projects. Often those are 10-year bonds, so it's nice to be able to capture in your picture of capital structure and financing that. It's very good to be able to picture the life of the financing mechanism. So 5-year capital plan is better than no capital plan. 10 years, I think, is reasonable. Anything more than 10 years is questionable. I mean, it's easy in some ways. Like for the fire department, a 50-year capital plan is perfectly feasible, because they have X number of those huge, big red trucks that cost $1 gazillion each, and they each need to be replaced on a cycle. And so you can project that out forever. But when you get into IT, you don't even know what the IT is next year, let alone what the cost of it is. So that becomes much more difficult, much more questionable.
And I do a 5 or 10 year capital plan with a 2 or 3 year revenue plan. keep rolling that forward. And it seems to me that's as far as I'd be comfortable. with the
You got a
numbers.
startup company.
Yeah, I do.
So I don't, I don't want to belabor this too much, but the advisory committee, for years, we did a long-term plan, kept, and what you're saying is right, we actually did a 30-year plan because we were trying to make sure certain projects looked like they wouldn't fit in and they weren't going to cannibalize the rest of what people wanted to do. And we were worried a few years ago that we were going to break the levy limit to $25. And I mean, we had, and we were worried, and it turns out, you know, we're not, we're fine. If anything, it's coming down a little bit because of the values going up so much. So we're fine with that. So I agree with you that, you know, it gets really tenuous after a few years as far as making any sense. But I think it does help to do a 5-year projection of operations, just broad, you know, town operations, schools. We're not trying to say, you know, DPW is going to go up to 100, you know, just overall, because we do have some control over that. And it does help you when you're trying to determine what you want departments to shoot for in that budget process, to be able to look a little bit forward as far as what may be coming, especially with schools and stuff like that. So I think we should, I like the idea of he's putting together the 5-year projection operations, and we've got a really good capital committee now that absolutely has a 10-year plan. So we're kind of far along in that path as far as something else. So,
I think we need to know what we can afford too. We have to stand in the town meeting and defend whatever projects
Right.
are coming forward. So you have to
Right.
have something to go off of,
Right.
right? And I think the general assumptions, you know, some broad, you know, plan is at least in the right direction.
So I was the interim town manager at Lexington in 2019, and some capital planning work. And in that community, it was used, you do, you know, you buy new fire trucks and all that kind of stuff. Whatever you have left over is for roads. And any money you can scrounge is for roads. Roads is their issue. So, but that was great because the community set that priority. They knew what they wanted. Rural community, roads are important, so that's what they did. So getting back to this, are there any other things in the list under administration operations that the board feels strongly ought to be moved up?
I'm gonna be the minority voice on this one, and it doesn't have to be moved up, but I still want to make sure that we're just, I'll get you, Chelsea. I know which one I'm talking about, which is, Ms. Malinowski is also chair of the Board of Health, and we have spent a lot of time the last couple years trying to figure out the right structure in 2022 for a local Board of Health. And I don't think we're there yet as far as that decision goes. And so I'm a minority voice on this board. Would still, I wanted to address once and for all, you know.
Yeah, I just don't think it's us to do it. That's why I gave it a 1.
Okay.
I think
You
it's,
want the Board of Health to do it.
right.
Okay, fine. I
Yeah, that's why I gave it a 1 here, because I don't think it's within select board purview.
I just want us to make sure the Board of Health is going to do it, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. I do not want us to do it. I just want to make sure it's in. So that's, okay, so I'm fine.
Everybody else okay?
The other thing I'll say is I liked how you said at the beginning, even though it may not be on the top 5 goals. I mean, any and all of these things under the 5, we can still do. If any member feels strongly enough about moving it forward, we've done that in the past. You know, you become the advocate for it, and, you know,
Right.
you ask for it to be on the agenda and you speak to it, and, you know, you continue down that path. And you know,
So,
Sam has done that with National Grid. It hasn't fallen off the radar since he's been on the board because of that reason. And again, I think we all have the capability and to do that, so.
right, so in the absence of anything else, what you're saying to your other boards, committees, and commissions and to staff is that these are the top priority for the Board of Selectmen in this area. So in absence of anything else, that's what Mark and his staff are going to put together action plans for those 5 items under operations. They're not going to do that for the other items. Now, if the board, you know, in September says, you know, the Board of Health thing is important, then obviously, you know, they'll have to put together an action plan for that, and have a full understanding of what that means.
I'll still try to bundle together the National Grid property in the town engineer. They fit nicely.
Administration operations.
Yes.
Just a couple points. One, 1.3 update SPU process for improved focus, efficiency, transparency. That is, I need some more focus on what exactly that means. Because that's the most general of the ones on the list.
That means down to short times, this is part of it.
Okay,
Which
that's
number
something
is that?
that's very easily said,
The
but
third
we
one.
have a ton of things that we deal with. We just go through them and. Okay, so, I mean,
Well,
what specifically would we do?
yeah, well, on that, I have some suggestions that hopefully we'll get to tonight.
Okay.
I'll either give it to you
This
in
is gonna be
writing
good
or,
then, we'll come back to that.
or we'll
one.
go through it tonight of some things to consider.
Okay. And on 1.1, where it's quarterly, is there any, I think, more frequently than quarterly? Quarterly is just a long, year, so. it's not a full-
So one of the things that will happen, this is the list, that Mark's gonna have to assign the staff person who's going to develop an action plan for them. And that person's gonna deal with one of the board members that you designate as a board. There's gonna be good as well. We're gonna have discussion, and then we'll come back to the full board eventually. So, that's an area where maybe the goal should be as specific as it's written. Maybe it should be a little bit more general. I'm not a fan of trying to edit things with, 5 or 6 people trying to do it on the fly, but if you wanted to eliminate, just eliminate the last sentence.
I agree that was pretty specific compared to the other goals. We have been told by knowledgeable people that, we've got ARPA money that's for a website design, right? But we've been told by people who know the software that we use that we really don't necessarily need a new website. We need to learn better how to use what we have. And of course, most people today get information online. So I'm not sure we need a quarterly newsletter other than a really robust, website where anybody can go and find the answer to what they want to know if it's there. So I say this really is a little too specific now, and it's fine to do with this, but let Vanessa and Mark, with Jay, come back with maybe a really good way to do a better job sending information. I don't know if this letter is what the right answer is, maybe it is.
So
So
my-
I actually had put this on here because I thought it was important that not everybody goes to the town website. I agree, Kathy, that applies to the whole outreach on how we can reach people better. I thought quarterly because there are people that are not really in tune as to what's going on in town government and what we do. And to be able to give them some idea of what we as the CEOs of the town are doing, some of those people that may not be on Facebook or any type of social media, at least they know, are better in tune as to what's going on. I think remote meetings has helped that in a big way with people, but I think this was just another step forward with transparency and finding a way to maybe reach those that we're currently not reaching. And that was my hope with that.
So one of the
It's not
things that when you get into that, however that's done through staff and the select board, there's a big difference. I think this is what you're saying. There's a big difference between telling people to go chase the information and having the information delivered to people. And when it's delivered to people, whether it's old fashioned paper or whether it's electronically, oh, interesting, maybe I'll read more. As opposed to, I don't know, why do I want to go to the website?
I agree.
But I think the
You can do
Kathy's
that
point,
electronically too, by the way. You can
Yes.
have people subscribe and then send it to them electronically or
Yes,
text or
I
whatever.
mean, I thought. This was like a week or two ago. And I sent that email on Friday. after, like, Here's things that happened this week. I thought that was excellent.
It was excellent.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
No, it was
7.
great. It was great.
That was great. And I was like, wow, a lot of things happened this week. No one had really, you know, and here I see some progress being made on some of these. What if we did that? I'm like.
And Mark has been
something
doing
like
that as well.
Yeah, you know, and just, you can subscribe to the,
Yeah.
a list, and so, I mean, I think one of the things we agree on is like, there's a lot of good things happening. Let people know about.
I think to Kathy's point, I think the meat of this is in the first sentence and not the second. I think
Yes.
there's a variety of channels we could use. The message for me is we gotta figure out better ways to communicate in a variety of ways, not just a newsletter, but, you know, again, if people suggested there are other ways to do it.
And what you say with National Grid, this has been on my list. I went back to my list since I've been on the board. So this is, I will admit, this was one of the things that I've been kicking around for a long time, but I thought was, again, just important.
And with a better website would be easier as well. There are other
Potentially, yeah.
ways we can do this.
So,
I think communication in local government is a big issue. I think it's extremely hard, partly because we're involved in so many things in local government. Now, if you think of, just think of in Southborough, the schools, all, you know, not that it's not important, but they're doing education. And so they have their built-in constituency. What's your built-in constituency? Roads, only if there's a problem. Public health, only if there's a problem. You know, snow plowing, only if there's a problem. So it's a very hard constituency to kind of get your arms around. My favorite expression was you communicate in a lot of different ways with your residents. If all else fails, you tie it around a rock and throw it through their window because they don't pay attention and they don't really care unless something's going on. So it is frustrating because you want, the select board, I think unanimously wants better communication. They want the residents to understand what's going on, right? So-
Andrew, I'm not tied to quarterly. I just want to make sure that I wanted it to be broad enough that it could get done. So
Understood.
monthly would be great as well.
Well, so you want for the goal, for the purpose of the goal, you want to take out the second sentence.
I don't, but it's up to the rest of the board. Everybody gets
No.
1 of 5.
Well, I don't want us to be locked into that, if that's what we're saying. It doesn't mean that's not where we're gonna end up. I just think it's too soon to be that specific.
How about EG? For example?
EG would do it for me. Vanessa, can you edit? Yeah. You know, going back to recess schools, look how much information they give to parents. There's this, oh, you know, they fill the packets of stuff, right? I'm not trying to say they see a packet of stuff, it's in the home, you know, a lot. And of course, parents, you know, couldn't wait to get into get those packets and read it. Our residents aren't like that, you know, unfortunately. So it is harder to figure out a way to effectively communicate in the way they want to actually read it. But I think we should work hard to try to do that.
It's hard to believe with the passion you all have for your community and your local government and Mark, Vanessa, and people like you throughout the Commonwealth. It's hard for us to get that our residents really don't care as long as we deliver.
I'm surprised at the number of times I've been asked at the transfer station, what is the select board?
Yeah.
We think we're very important. But
You're so right.
We are very important.
Did you send them to Marty Healy for an explanation of select board?
I'm a kind guy.
Being on to, again, to move on. Remote meetings have helped a lot because people can sit at home and watch it. I don't have to slow down to where we are. At our June 14th meeting, last time I looked, there were over 400 people that watched the YouTube, right? Now, it could be the same people more than once. Bridget watched it to do minutes, right? But 200 people came to town meeting, and less than that the second night. And how many people voted? Not many. The election wasn't any, there wasn't a lot. There was one election, test election. So there weren't a lot of people, but 400 people watched me. We've never had 400 people come to an in-person meeting that I can remember. So that part's good.
I agree.
Well, it's one of the nice
Small
things.
town meeting.
First night.
Because there's an issue.
Well,
and
that's
it's
all,
all- you know, it's an issue of bringing people out, schools,
Yeah.
Burnett House, they'll come, but if it's just, you know, the normal stuff, the budget, whatever. And, you know, we still have COVID going on with this last one, so.
Well, and you have the technology now, really, to be able to expand the number of people who can participate through from the home. But still, you're not getting all that. You know, I mean, it's a little hard to believe.
But people are talking, I will tell you, I get more, run into people at the grocery store now and people talking about what's taking place at specific meetings
I know.
than ever in the past,
I
which
know.
again, it's great, other than I'm usually at the grocery store for 2.5 hours. You know, but that's okay, you know, that's what I think we all want is the public to be tuned in, you know, to what we're doing.
Sure.
So we're doing the right things that the public wants us to do.
So when we first started televising meetings, I think there was, you know, curious. Of course, the nice thing about television is you can flip around and you can get across what we're talking about. You know, you can watch something else. But after cable TV in Reading, Selectmen's meetings were televised, I tell my wife, I'm going down to the market, I'll be back in 3 hours. Because, you know, if you get a sewer problem, how come the snowplow plows all the snow on my side of the road, you know, whatever it is. You're right.
It's great.
All right, let's move to community development. So the 5 highest priorities were to support EDC efforts to retain business in Southborough, actively deal with the new Park Central 40B project to achieve best outcome, more diversity in housing, support EDC efforts to revitalize downtown and investigate potential zoning changes on Route 9. 3 of you that in that same category. Continue to support open space and trails. Again, this is a logical break. Look at the difference. That's a pretty sizable difference between your 5th and your 6th items.
But you also might say, just you move the cursor over a little bit to the left. 2.1 and 2.4 are pretty close. They might be combined.
I wasn't clear enough in my own mind when I was doing this. There are certainly similarities, and you can suggest that even the more diversity in housing related to 40B, there might be a connection there. So, you know, if you want, if that the board feels comfortable doing that, and then is there something here that you need to move up? There's no shame in having only 4 goals in a category.
So I think 2.2, Peter, and 2.3 are very different. In what they're looking to achieve. I will say the reason I gave 2.2 and 3 is on a 40B, the majority of discussion on that falls with the CBA and the planning board. And the select board doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of input in that process. Certainly the board could take a position, but as far as permitting and whatnot, public hearings, that all takes place through the ZBA and potentially planning board. So that was why I did that as 3. And diversity in housing is more than just the 40B component. So I personally think they should be separate.
Well, I do too. Different reason for it.
So what about I think 2.1 and
2.4.
2.4, Are those sort of the same thing? I
They're
don't know.
very similar.
But I don't object to having 4.
So I've got a question on one, and this may fall in the same category. We think it's underway, which is the disposition of Southampton property. Chelsea, I think you did a one.
I did, because we already have the subcommittee.
Okay, so you think it's underway?
Yeah,
Not that you don't think it's important.
Yeah.
No, no,
All right.
no.
So is the sense that you want to combine 2.1 and 2.4? I'm sorry.
I'm fine with maybe in the minority. So.
I actually,
Well, if we're not gonna move one up, then what does it matter? So-
Yeah.
We can separate, I think I'm fine with.
I think if the EDC efforts to retain businesses, like the business meetings that have been happening with EDC, that's kind of what I got of that. And then 2.4 as being, looking at what potential opportunities could exist and working with the other boards and committees to, or, you know, the grant that we have for Route 9, kind of pulling that in. So I looked at it as 2.1 is almost like shorter term, doesn't require town meeting potential, and 2.4, you know, if there's zoning included, then it's gonna be obviously more than just us being involved.
So we separate stuff 5 and everybody wants to consider that.
I think Sam's trying to figure out how we can fit National Grid. into
Well, I looked down there and it's not
2.4. So Sam's not gonna say anything about putting them together, because that works.
It's pretty far down.
There's no hope.
There is hope.
Another reason I think there's 2 different EDC items on here, which is one thing that is kind of part of the mix is having Mariah's departure, and there's an ad trying to build a part-time position. That's a bigger picture item, right? Is EDC coordinator, what's the best way to have that position? One of the things that I had put earlier on, it looks like we got some traction, didn't go that far, was thinking about instead of having that maybe a full-time position, combining it with some of the other things that we talked about before. Like,
Yeah.
and just getting information out. There are some related things that you could do there. But I just thought that because I agree with you that the business meetings, that's something like, how is that going to continue? They can start it and just.
But I think that the board putting this together as we get into the interview process to fill that position is gonna help Vanessa and whoever else is sitting on the interviews and say, these are the goals that the board has set for community development, for economic development. And these are the things we're gonna ask you to focus on. Talk to me about what you've done in terms of, retaining businesses, but trying to provide those open space opportunities. You talked about some of those pieces as to how you're gonna do that. How are you gonna get the message out as to going back to the prior category in terms of utilizing social media and building that consensus to move forward on this thing? So I think that something like this is tremendously helpful in getting the right person in this position. So someone can't say, well, I don't know that person really is what we're looking for, but this is what you're looking for them to push forward. So I think the timing of this probably is pretty good for that position.
But this doesn't preclude what you're talking about, thinking about a full-time and adding more to it. We can still do it as part of the budget discussion for next year, part of special town meeting. If we want to revise the budget for the current year. So this does not take that off the table, I don't think.
I think that if the board's consensus is what Andrew was just pointing to about combining grant writing or something else like that together, I would want to know that sooner rather than later, as I'm going to recruit someone. A 19.5-hour employee is very different than a 40-hour employee.
That's another thing that we're kind of, encountering is the hiring environment is way different than it was 3-4 years ago, right? Already, like there's.
I only have 5 candidates.
Yeah.
2 jobs for every 1 person applying for jobs, and that's what that is across the country.
I'm impressed that you have that many. I was an acting economic development director because the town of Westwood couldn't find anybody else and I was retired. So they had me doing it for a year.
So Andrew, are you looking for I'm supportive of a grant writer, but I'm not supportive of it for one specific department. I'm looking for.
No, it's, oh, you're.
Townwide.
Exactly.
Townwide.
One person.
That what I would be
I'm
supportive
just
of.
throwing it out there, that position that. Again, someone that is. I definitely thought there was maybe some relationship with someone. And then also someone. Supporting and scheduling meetings with people. How that person's focused on promoting the town, getting information out there. I don't know whether these functions can all be done in one position. But I do know that it's hard to fill these part-time positions.
So let me ask one more question. So who would set the priorities for the grant writer as far as goals? If the grant writer, let me say, the EDC coordinator answers, well, somewhat tomorrow, but overall it's to the EDC, let's be realistic. And then you have a grant writer in the same position, who's gonna prioritize what grants and their role? I'm concerned there might be some level
I don't have a great answer. That's a very good question. You know, like what line, where in the budget is it going? Who is
Yeah.
that person report to?
But I'm very supportive of trying this out. We've never done it. Sam's been talking about it for quite a while. I bought into it a couple years ago from the project that we really should try this with all the grants that are out there. Somebody really understands the process, because it's a science, right? It's an art, and it's a science to do it right. So I'm all for trying to incorporate a grant writer someplace, whether it's the EDC coordinator, whether it's someplace else. So
I think we set the priorities on it. We through Mark. And I mean, I think that is townwide. I mean, other elected boards, I think, participate as well. I mean, at the schools, they've got their own resources, but it seems to me, if you get the right person, they would find opportunities out there and come back and say, here are the opportunities, and then we can say, this one, let's go after, this one, not so much, and they can put from various people. I'm convinced that they more than their salary back many times over.
And not to go too far down the grant rabbit hole, but I do think that a lot of times we're so focused on getting an application and getting the money.
totally agree.
Yeah.
And then we get the money,
Yeah.
and we're like, okay, what's the plan?
I agree.
And
The
I
project's
really-
gotta come first.
I really think the plan, and the problem is that, and I think Mr. Healy was pretty accurate with the way that this administration, the governor, the way that they just put money in a bucket, throw a program together, and they get it out there and say, come and get it. It doesn't give you a lot of time to do the planning and structure, but I really think that this board, before if you have the control over that piece, before someone goes out and gets a grant, there's gonna be a plan.
I agree.
It's just like a capital project. You're not just gonna go and give money to a project if someone's like, yeah, we haven't figured out the details. We think this is what we need.
I think we all agree with that.
Management is
And the
key.
reason I think the state threw it out, that they had so much money coming from all of the laws that were passed for COVID, they were just flush with cash.
With all of these, with all of the, audits and, COVID and taking the money back for the cares and everything, I want to know where that's all. Excuse me, as to what's going to be done with that now.
Yeah.
So I agree that we're not done with
A lot
seeing
of-
more of that.
A lot of communities have gotten themselves into trouble with exactly what Mark says. You're chasing the money instead of understanding a need
I think you can say
and then trying to get money.
grants can't chase projects, projects need to chase grants.
But I think we're doing it right here. We come out with
Well, this
goals.
is,
Yes.
it's certainly a part of it.
Right.
And a long-term capital plan is a part of it. And long-term strategic planning and long-term budgeting are all part of it.
But if we get the right person in this position, they can look at this list and say, there's money here, there's no money there. So let's figure out where the money is and where the need is and try to match that as best we can.
I'm supportive of the grant writer. I just think there's more discussion that has to take place. I think, Vanessa, I know you'll be looking if the board is gonna flip it to full time. I think it's a good idea because I think there's smaller boards and committees use trails. Look what trails did. Trails had that, I mean, they did a tremendous job with trying to apply. If there was somebody that did this for a living, I think open space is another one. I think they could truly benefit from this.
So I think we need to look at it more holistically though, in terms of, are we set up the right way for staffing in general? So I know there were some positions sprinkled into the goals, that maybe didn't make it to the top of the list, but are we outsourcing the right things to begin with? And what really are our needs, and looking at it, and I don't think we're gonna get through that in a year, but I think starting to look at it from a high level view, and maybe we start with the EDC position, grant writer, and, you know, how does that fit in with the DPW? Because I think a lot of the grants that are coming up are going to be infrastructure projects. And so is it a grant writer and some sort of project management experience that we have in-house? Do we need that type of expertise? I mean, you know, I think I'm not against the idea. I just don't want to jump to a conclusion that this is the type of person that we need. And I don't know the last time that we looked at every position in town and see how they fit in together, and are we operating as efficiently as we can?
So that was sort of stated as a goal in 4.1.
I bet you that was my goal.
Maybe review staffing
It
across departments to identify.
Yeah.
Leading the witness.
Yeah, that was good.
So
That's where it's coming from.
I agree, it needs to be done, but I would put that in the longer term strategic planning that we jump to next. So maybe what we could do is, and we've already got the budget passed for fiscal year 23. Yes, we could amend it at the special town meeting if we wanted to. But the job is posted for EDC, it's done. So I'd say leave it alone for now, but let's, one of the priorities within, as we put together our budget priorities for fiscal year 24, put this in it, say, let's figure out a way to get the grant writer.
And I don't think you should try to force two unrelated positions together, which you may think are related. I mean, you know, in our office, your office, and treasurer's office, you know, we're sharing a position. You've got to have the right person to do it, and we have the right person right now. It's looking great. You know, we need to find out where those natural relationships in grant writing and EDC may not be that natural position. EDC may tie better with something else if you wanted to do something. So we need to be open to it, but we don't have a whole lot of part-time positions right now that we can consolidate with each other, because we have done that and try to put those, you know, put those together.
Sounds like the gist of this is that this discussion about this position is really something that, I think of it as something that that's a full-time meeting or annual time meeting goes through the whole process. I think part of it, I think it's an annual. Okay, that's.
I think it's more annual, but it could be fall. I think it depends on where everything falls out as far as what our true final tax rate's gonna be when it's all settled, which is gonna be pretty soon, and see how far off we are from what we thought it was at the annual meeting. But you're seeing, I think all 5 people agree that this is a good idea to truly incorporate.
So going back to these 5 statements. We're okay with that? As a priorities in community development. Next area is finance. Yeah, finance had understandably the next largest number of proposed goals, but the 5 that are at the top of the list. Develop 5-year operational capital budget to understand options for larger projects and their capital needs. Town treasurer develop 5-year fiscal projection not later than September to inform the next budget cycle. I sense a tree issue. I've read some of your minutes. Trees, determine the appropriate funding amount for catch-up and ongoing maintenance of trees. You know, that's a finance issue and it's a DPW issue. But
It
why not?
belongs there because if we're gonna do it, we gotta get it on the warrant for the fall.
Continue to allocate ARPA funds appropriately, including using recommendations of ARPA committee, and explore grant writing opportunities. And the opportunities may be to hire a grant writer. Obviously. So it was a much closer division from item 5, 3.5 to 3.6 than you saw in the previous categories. You have to draw a line somewhere. The next item was budget software, finance director, town accountant, lead implementation of new budget software. I sort of got the impression that this is in the works now, is that correct? So this is in progress, so. And that may be why, people didn't rate it. So,
Well, most people rated that one pretty high. Chelsea, you the two?
No, I was the five.
Okay.
I didn't think it was as far along, and I wanted it to be to give it a one.
I would combine, I think 1 and 2 should be combined.
I agree.
And then move,
Totally.
this budget software, this is important. I mean,
Right.
you need a good budget software to truly do the job you need to do. So I would move up the budget software.
So you want to combine 3.1, 3.2? Because they're both 5-year
They're different.
outlooks. This, excuse me, this is, do that?
No, that would be-
You're saying
Okay.
develop a 5-year operational plan on both of them.
So-
So I don't think the first one does include capital too, but the second one, to me, repeats part of the first one.
On 3.6, just see it as, I remember we had just good old fashioned Excel spreadsheets. And the problem was they constantly changing, version, et cetera, et cetera. But they're pretty easy to understand.
They are.
You can download on your computer.
Yep.
Then we went to ClearGov. And you see there's just big implementation, trying to get 100, a lot of different departments hitting. It was so. And then this year I kind of liked it, just a good old fashioned Excel. It has the downside of having different versions, not catching up to each other. But
You
it's
know how much
pretty.
time they spent fixing the errors?
The problem,
Way too much
the
time.
What did
problem-
Chelsea say?
They spent so much time
Yeah.
fixing errors.
Okay,
I love the spreadsheet, and there's a way
Yeah.
to get rid of that problem.
All right.
Much work. The ClearGov, I've already missed it during the year. There were things about it we really liked. We didn't like everything about it, but we liked it, so we missed it. So we wanted to see the budget software come out. But what doesn't mean we're gonna do the spreadsheet. We all like the spreadsheet, we know how to use it.
so if we do this, this is like, I just hope hopefully we won't have to like third or fourth time. we just do this. This would be looking at like one potential new system, and then if we got it, we would buy a license for it and then get used to this is the way to do it.
I mean, that was the whole first time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think,
I'm just a
I
little bit
think
jaundiced
this is-
from.
this is a
the
redo.
ClearGov experience.
I think, anytime you implement a software, you'll be stick with it.
Because I was trying to train myself to learn their view, and it's like, we're not using it anymore, so.
They're looking at three. Right. They're looking
Oh.
at 3 different softwares, right?
Very few people
Okay.
ended up understanding ClearGov, so that's a fact. Even on advisory, we did not get it. I got lots of questions about, and so I'd say most people didn't get it. So we do need something that is easy for people to grasp, right? That's got some intuitiveness to it, that is portal based. But I still think we try to do it, because I think we do need that to truly keep track of things during the year, That's what the benefit is. The spreadsheet actually goes fine as far as coming to, but to keep track of things during the year, where we really stand.
So we combine those planning ones and move the budget software up, we still got a problem.
Lisa, why do you think 1 and 2 are different?
Because I looked, okay, and again, this wasn't my goal, so I don't know. When I look at a 5-year capital budget, I look to capital.
So I did operational / capital.
Right. So, I mean,
1 was mine.
I think operational is inherently for beyond 1 year, it's a projection.
right,
And I don't think that changes. I mean, I think 1 and 2, 3.1 and 3.2 are essentially
that's fine.
the same type of thing,
Yeah, I
but
I
again,
mean, obviously, it was
This one
important.
seems to have a capital focus.
4 and
This
5,
is,
right,
this
right.
is,
I know
One's
3.2,
expenditure,
it's
the other's revenue.
3.1 covers it, that's fine.
I mean, I thought they were both important, so I'm fine either way,
I think they're both important too. I just think one does it.
That's fine.
I'm trying to get the budget moved, the software moved up.
Yeah.
No, I'm good with that, I'm fine with that, so.
No, that's too far down.
There's only 0.2 off, Sam.
so is a sense that we're combining these or
Yes.
not?
Yeah.
We are combining it.
And then
Okay.
move the budget software up, is that what?
Yeah.
And then we are including the budget
So are
software
we gonna,
as the
take-
fifth goal.
the add the maintain the AAA bonding within? Did you say move that up,
That's still-
Chelsea?
No,
I
it's
didn't.
still below, yeah.
Okay, I thought somebody said maybe Kathy combine the two. Did you say combine?
No, but
We certainly do want to maintain our AAA bond.
so what, can you scroll up a little bit, Nessa?
So do we want to reword this
Sorry,
at
I think it
all?
was supposed to be said it.
I think you can just go with the wording from 3.1 and add the word projection after develop 5-year.
Yeah.
Put in the word projection.
Okay, right here.
Or after the word operation?
Just
And take out town treasurer.
So I didn't print my, Jessica, can you scroll down so we can see
Yeah.
what Lisa's talking about with the bond rating?
I thought somebody said that 3.6 and 3.7, I could be completely, I
didn't do that.
misunderstood.
I didn't do that.
I misunderstood.
I think that's likely to happen if we do learn something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think though, this was one of mine, but on the AAA bond rating, there were certain things that the auditor suggested that we do that I don't think are included above, like looking at updating our policies and procedures for like a stabilization. Like, I think we do have some work to do, and I think it's in conjunction with advisory.
And that's coming, they're working on
can do
that,
that.
they're gonna make
Yeah.
they're gonna come to us and basically say, we at least need to stabilize free cash, start there. But advisor's got a pretty good handle on that bond rating as far as truly what the two bond rating agencies are looking at, we got to talk to them. And we know truly what they're looking for as far as excess cash, so it's not just stabilization, it's a lot of things to get together. So I agree, we need to focus on it, make sure that we keep it, because of course it saves us so much money with interest rates.
Right.
But I think that's what happened.
So is budget software being moved up?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 5 goals
Still fine.
combined, 1 and 2. And then we're adding the budget software. Move this up for 6. That's fine.
Okay.
Everybody happy with that?
Sure.
Okay, next area was human resources, boards, committees, and employees. So the top 5 goals were to provide support to DPW head in her major decisions, make decisions on public safety dispatch regionalization, updating, consolidating policies, handbook, making sure our volunteers understand and have better guidance of our expectations and adherence. Training, review, enhance, and fund training for, I think I didn't move the line down there. This is
Employees and
probably more-
volunteer opportunities, general and department specific.
Thank you. And then 5 was to hire a new police chief.
Well, either you wanted it there or you didn't, so.
And there's not a large gap between that and the 4.6, a yearly survey of all employees regarding process, room for improvement, morale, and general thoughts. So. Thoughts on these?
Just some thoughts. Kathy, it sounded like you wanted to keep hiring the police chief.
Yeah, but after discussion tonight, as long as we know, I'm happy, because there is a couple I would like to see moved up. So Nessa, can you go down a couple more lines just so we can see the next method? So I'm happy to take it off, given what we said tonight, as far as the reason for the 2 ones.
So I actually think that 4.6 is kind of interesting. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the fire department long-term strategic planning. Committee the same time last year, and they did this as part of their long-term strategic plan. And it was kind of interesting. And, you know, I think the key with surveys is in keeping the more and more as the survey won't be just 1 through 5, and it's computer, it's anonymous, and you keep it pretty focused, you make it so it's fast, complete. And definitely the feedback section where you can just kind of throw something out there, that's definitely interesting. And also, like with the noise bylaw committee, where the survey that was sent out, there are some interesting things set in the free-form response part. So I think that's, if we didn't have, if hire a police chief is one of the roles, that's something we could potentially move on.
So is this the one that you would then want to move up? Really survey?
I would be fine with that.
Of all the others, yeah. We have a mechanism, the technology committee has a great survey tool.
So can we talk about 4.7 before we decide for sure to move up 4.6? I'm happy with 4.6 and get rid of those 2 times. I also like those we can check off too, so let's give this one that we could have checked off and we can sure. But anyway, 4.7. We all know that we don't appoint, we know there's been a lot of discussion, right? We know that since we met last, a new member has been appointed who is very interested, as long as Mr. Cyrus, and seeing this revitalized and providing support and advice, like you're supposed to do about DP tech stuff. So again, I think we've got a role there in that. I actually met with Mr. Bowman today as far as helping to revitalize that. So if you don't move it up, I still want to make sure that, you know, we're going to work on this one.
It's on the agenda for next week.
It is, and that's what caused it, was the conversation I had this morning.
I put it low because we don't control it. And I think the issue there is if we actually get one more appointment, I'm interested in working like the board could work, I think that tips the balance, but we have influence that. So Mr. Savino's position to appoint someone else that is interested in actually taking on a broader scope, then I think that allows us to do that.
But
So far, that hasn't.
I think that ball has already started to roll though, in terms of, I know that capital.
And maybe
and
July
Public Works
18th.
Planning Board is planning a joint meeting
Yeah,
again,
18th, yeah.
reviewing some of these projects, whether it's Hopkinton or, you know, something else. And so I think that may help too. Again, it's gonna be, I think, one of those things, whether you move it up or not, I think it's gonna continue, it's gonna, you know, move in a more positive direction.
I agree, that's a good, it's, the ball has started to roll, so.
So did I miss the agenda for
We
next
got
week
added
that this is
today.
on?
We got it today.
I haven't seen an agenda.
I believe it was sent over
Very late.
today.
It was
The
like
agenda was
5
sent out
o'clock.
yesterday, as far as the draft agenda by Melanie, and then today it's got added, and I don't know if that revised agenda is coming. Okay, but anyway, so not late, so we'll move up 4.6, leave 4.7 down.
Andrew, how did you see the agenda if it's not posted? I'm just curious.
And it was on the secret distribution.
I know, I'm just saying, I haven't seen the agenda, so I'm just curious how Andrew.
So Vanessa, go ahead, move up 4.6.
So just a caution on 4.6. It's a lot of work. Developing the mechanism that you use and then doing something with it, evaluating it, summarizing it. So
We have the mechanism.
mechanism being survey.
Well, there's another one that the technology committee actually has a survey structure.
Okay.
That they use for other purposes. So in theory, we could use that, but there is work to define what are the questions. And then the analysis, again, flows pretty easily out of the survey.
I mean, I think this board should be the one driving that survey.
Yeah.
And again, I think one of the complaints about the MTC survey is that it was just too long.
Yeah.
Right, again, you want that quick hitting, so people are gonna wanna do this, you have 15 minutes to go from this point.
Yeah.
I mean, you want, and again, I agree that some of the open-ended comments that people add sometimes more valuable than the box and check.
But we could drive it.
Yes. Oh, I'm just saying, yes, I mean, we do have the mechanism, but I think the board, or a member, whoever's assigned and everything, that should be helping to drive
Agreed.
that.
I think it's important.
You got that? So we'll be moving that up. We good on HR? Infrastructure. So the top 5 in infrastructure, and actually it's the top 8 because you had a tie score for the 5th place. They pursue software to evaluate road maintenance priority and sidewalks. St. Mark Street Park project, complete the project plan, project in an appropriate manner that's supported by the majority of town residents. Initiate Corderville Road improvement project, including impact on trees. I agree with that one, but only if you put a better sign for Route 9 turn, because that comes up very close. Finish current road projects, including Main Street, North Row Road, Culvert, Newton Street water line installation. Can you expand 5.5? Doesn't look like it's. Focus ARPA funds for sidewalks and coordinate with DPW.
That's the first consensus item.
So,
Oh, yeah.
so that is tied with remediation of Breakneck Hill dump. Continue to develop a long-term ADA plan to correct items identified. And Neary continue dealing with future of the school through the Neary bond building committee. So just by the tie, there are a lot of items in there. And then you go from 4.0 to 3.8, which is fairly close. Great.
So just a thought on 5.8. I looking at it now, I put 5 there, I should put 1 there. And being consistent with what I've done throughout, because that's already being done. There's already a building committee in place. So, I mean, you're gonna continue dealing with that as long as we're in the MSBA process.
So
So
you did the one, Chelsea?
Yep, I should.
Well, so now I know what you're doing. This helps, right? They're the one. But this project is so important.
Yep.
I'm okay. Yep, we know it's gonna keep going. Whether we make it go or not, and we're really not doing the legwork right now, right? We're waiting.
Right.
So
And we
I'm
have
okay.
18 months, right?
I'm okay, but big thing.
I mean,
So I
I'm-
completely agree.
For consistency purposes, with everything I've said, I should have.
But back up and remember that this is not only the board's priority, you're trying to set priorities for the organization.
Right.
Okay, including staff time, including building committees, including capital committee, all of them.
But I look at this as school administration versus town administration. And that committee has full purview over the financial aspect that was given at town meeting.
They go first.
let me ask you a question.
The town
Is
goes
this a
last, so you're
school-
supposed to approve
Is
it.
this a school
No, no,
building
I know,
committee
but-
under
Yes.
the state definition?
Yes.
Yeah,
It is.
Yes.
I just looked at it for this year. What are we gonna have to do for this one? That's how I was looking at it.
The other comment I would make in terms of 5.6 remediation of Breakneck Hill dump, we're under administrative consent order with DEP. Again, that ball's rolling. The first phase is all set, we're bound into that being done, so you can have it as a goal, but I think it's a little bit of a wasted goal simply because you have to do certain things and fund certain things at certain times. So that's pretty much already set for you.
I would disagree slightly. That one, we're in the investigation phase, right? We're not in the remediation phase yet. We don't know what it's gonna look like, because we don't know what the investigation is gonna say. So this one is so important to many people in town. It's been around for a long time. I want that one left there, even if maybe I'm a little critical as far as we're not gonna put things here that have already started. I just don't think.
But I think
remediation
you're, I
has
think
not
you're,
started.
I think you're bound into it, and I think the important piece for that particular piece goes back to your first item under admin operations, develop better ways of outreach to the public, because I agree, a lot of people are interested in that and how, how it's going and what's going to happen.
But I disagree, Rick. I think we don't know yet what the total cost of that's gonna
You
be.
don't.
So for me, I think it's important to leave on here until we can close the loop. I know we're in a phase, but I think people are interested to know as we go through and the investigation goes through, what is the cost really gonna be?
And we're gonna, whether it's a goal or not, we're gonna talk about that.
Well, I
And I'm trying to break the 4.0 log jam,
know, again, I'm,
know?
Well, we're gonna take out Neary, I think, so, well, I like Neary on here, but I'm going to defer to the rationale of not, got 3 5s there. I'm okay with having 8. Things.
I agree.
mean,
I agree.
everybody's a big
Me too.
deal.
I am, yeah.
yeah, just leave it.
I just wanted to be clear that the reason why I gave it a 1 was because I just don't think there's gonna be an action. I think we're gonna follow
Oh,
it.
I get it now.
Right?
You don't want the police chief, you don't want the, so now I get it.
She wants a lawless society where she can put her trash where she wants to.
There you go.
Let's break that bill.
I mean, I as well, I'm fine with leaving.
But I think the
Oh,
issue for
right.
me is that if it's underway, that means we don't have to spend a lot of our time.
To that point, now, like 5.4.
So
Northmore Road,
on the Neary School, that is a school building committee under
Yeah.
state statute, then you really don't have a dog in that. hunt.
Yeah.
Because it's the school committee is
Until
driving
they've
that.
done
project.
Until they make a decision, correct.
Yeah. So I'm staying close to.
Okay.
it.
Well, but that's a different
See,
item.
just to
That's
be
not,
clear, this
that's not a
committee,
school building committee.
it's an
That's
ad
a-
hoc committee under, select board appointed this committee. So it's an ad hoc committee under select board, and we will hear from them sometime during this year, not sure when, not sure what we're gonna hear. So I'd rather state it, because I think this, to me, that is just, at the very top of my list as far as what's important. Lisa, are you disappointed the trees didn't move up to 4? Because, we're gonna get to the trees before we get to 4, so, it's not like we haven't mentioned trees.
Yeah, no, I think, again, I think you're gonna see the process for trees, Kathy, before town meeting. I mean, Mimi's on vacation this week, so we didn't get done as much as we'd like. The conversations are taking place and we're drafting stuff now, so I'm fine with leaving it because it's gonna be done before town meeting.
And next week, we're gonna list what we think is going on the warrant, and let's get started, so in that, I'm sure.
That is the first
First
article.
article.
That's number 1.
Yeah, we agree.
Yeah,
You have agreed, agreement, so yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
so I'm fine.
okay, I was just thinking of about 5.5. Resident survey said consistent to people like to see sidewalks. My recollection was that the ARPA committee, one of the recommendations they had potential uses was for sidewalks.
The
There's a
biggest
big-
issue, $704,000.
Okay, so
The
there's
biggest
a-
issue was the sidewalks.
And there's a deadline to spend that.
Yep.
2 years.
Yeah.
So just, I think that's a good goal because there's a lot of thinking that needs to go into that. Where would it be? How would it be done? And then having something like that, go to the Public Works Planning Board and just have all the process out there. Like, this is what we're doing. There's an opportunity to get something done, and I'm afraid it might be lost. We don't put it on the list to try to just, rather just do it this year. If you try to do it in the last year in which you need to spend the money.
You got to
just run the
decide
risk
by
of-
the end of 24, what you're gonna spend it on. You gotta spend it by the end of 26.
Okay, I would still err on the side of.
I agree. No, I agree.
Sooner rather than
Yeah.
later.
Would it make sense then, and I agree with you, Andrew, to do 5.5, 5.6, and 5.8, put an asterisk as to follow up? Because, again, I don't know that there's gonna be a whole lot initially as a goal for us to do, to be able to be
Yeah.
liaison, but if we do an asterisk, it makes more sense to leave them all there. Not as an action item per se, but it's still important enough to be a goal, but there's work being done on
Okay,
it.
another
That's a
thing
suggestion.
that I was going is like 5.4, the ball has already kind of rolled. Several of those, right? North Borough Culverts Hill. There's gonna be reconstruction meeting next week.
Yes.
And then Main Street,
He's just got some bumps.
Specifically a track, yes.
Yeah.
and so maybe we can compare.
Yeah. But I think you're right for.
So again, important stuff that I think we ought to keep a close eye on and keep pushing as best we can.
Right, and I think for the public to see, again, maybe an asterisk for the follow-up, it's not as much of an action item as some of the others, but it's still on our radar, it's still important. and it
But
still
I think,
deserves
I
to
think
be-
when you fill out that action sheet, remember how Pete
Yeah.
had said, some of them are gonna have like one
Yeah.
piece and some
Right.
are gonna have a bunch? I think you can put that on, you have that on your goal sheet, and your action is simply going to be to continue to follow, I mean, we can figure out whatever wording, depending on the liaison for the board. But I agree, I think those are less action at this point, more shepherding.
I was just thinking, if I'm a member of the public and I'm gonna look at where you ended up on goals, and if I'm looking at remediation on Breakneck Hill, specifically, I'm gonna be asking you as a board, what are you doing? Unless, there's something saying that, it's in the works, so it's a follow-up, or it's, again, it's just clarity. But again,
And we can put in there a message under the action item, I think that will help answer that.
And I hope, again, we publish and update the stuff for the public to look at. as we go
Yes.
along and answer
Yes.
questions.
One thing on Mary too, that is an action item that's related, is that on July 12th, one of our agenda items is to consider Capital's request to form another committee, ad hoc committee, to separate the discussion of a community center from everything else we're discussing, right? So we do have things to do under that, if you include that as part of it.
So the consensus is 1 through 5. And then 5, 6, right? We're keeping that on,
I would leave it just like it is. I vote to leave it like it is.
Yeah, it's fine,
so leave it,
just like it
leave
is.
all these items on.
Oh, yep. Yep. That's what I would do.
So the next pieces that have to be done here are to publish your list of goals by category. Some communities will keep the leftovers, the ones that aren't the highest priority goals. They'll keep that in a list. Some will just take it off the list and put it aside so that it's not lost, but not focused on when you talk about goals. So that's a decision for you all. I guess from having heard the discussion and talked to all of you a bit, my suggestion would be keep this document with the 5 plus or minus goals in each category as a separate document. Put the others aside as a separate document.
Nothing's gonna happen on these anything necessarily. So I think it's useful to at least look at them occasionally and as best we can. to
Mhm.
Keep some of them moving as we get opportunities. Keep things moving. So
I
An
thought it was an
opportunity
excellent
is,
bill,
These are good
all the way
things. yeah.
through.
opportunity is the term I usually use for those leftover goals. Those are the opportunity goals. When there's an opportunity to deal with something, you deal with it in those areas.
Or if we find grant money someplace to do
Well,
some of these
exactly.
other things, maybe we can think about it.
Exactly. Okay, so we'll put that together for you as a list. We'll take this out, but we'll leave this in. So what you're going to need to do, Mark is going to need to assign a staff lead for each of those goals. The board is going to need to establish a select board liaison. You can do that tonight if you want. You need to get that done. And then the target date is part of the larger action plan. Can you put that action plan document
I think we publish the rest of them up for volunteers to be liaisons.
Would you, are you looking to, well, select 12, do one meeting on this?
So far.
Yeah.
And July 12th is not crazy, but if we do what Sam said, with Jay's help, he's gonna help us start using OneDrive a little bit more than we do right now. He's gonna set up some folders for select board. So that everybody can write to.
Okay.
So we get that set up, everybody can go in, you know, and if we got more than one person, we can work it out. Hopefully we do, right? So I think we can get that done outside a meeting and then finalize it at a meeting. I don't want to wait till August 12th or August 9th to do
Right.
this.
Needs to be a homework assignment.
Andrew, for everything.
You can go
Oh,
through-
that's not fair. You can't volunteer somebody else. That's gonna be one of the rules. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Okay, so, once you get a staff assigned and a select board liaison assigned, then the staff person is going to fill out this form. Could be one line, could be 20 lines, depending on, usually on how complex the issue is. Consult with the select board liaison, make sure that they've considered everything. So the select board liaison is important. Doesn't have to be the person who proposed the goal. But it just should be somebody who has some interest in that area. And then this becomes part of the goals package. Right, so when you do your quarterly review of goals, and you are going to do it quarterly, right? You do your quarterly review of goals, you'll have the goal statement, you'll have these, and some kind of a progress report on it. It just helps keep us focused. Really important. So, do you want to take 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Stretch. Body break. Nice job.
So, that's right,
Thank you.
or two, and six. So, we have to fix this. She asked me, so I told her. So you were comfortable with this? Yeah. So what did you? So, we know. Well, I don't want to use. As long as we're sure, you know, he knows. Well, and he knows if you don't know because you know, because, you know, and it's just. He is. Yes, not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very fast. It is.
Okay, thank you.
And it's very clear, he doesn't. He thinks that.
I saw the versions, but I mean, I saw some good suggestions. Some of them they were shy.
So I said, that's why I'm just. Okay, good, I said, never mind.
Another is just see. Because mostly just because this is where we are.
You know what we want to So you two, you know, this is not gonna be, I think the person who's not going to
Actually, it works.
And it's not, right, so that's, you know, he may love us, I'm not sure, I don't know.
Right, so it is a position.
I think it's. But anyway.
I don't know.
Another thing, you know, two things.
No, I'd say no.
Letters to.
Somebody comes and asks me and such like that, because you guys have hell
On Saturday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freezing.
Oh,
Yeah, it's kind of like everybody would say about a manager's meeting.
Oh.
Understand that, you know,
Behind
no
the fire
problem
department.
getting feedback.
An hour on Saturday.
I think it's-
I mean, we got drilled. Yeah.
And also.
We didn't lose that, you know, we're in the hospital with, and so we, even if we lose it, we get back
The latest on
the
that
fastest.
is-
We go to the hospital first.
Well, I'm dealing with brand new property.
Not that I don't just please.
He wants the building projects that we can get.
Could be on this
And
slide.
it's not like, and one, we have 50 years of survey, he works on the.
Yeah.
Six for one. This
Yeah.
is.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I think it just depends on where you work there too.
Well, you know, Marine Home Center is the life, you know, the whole thing, right? So you gotta know how to get into the home center. gotta know what's going on.
Oh,
Don't have my tax budget, you get everything. This guy has no relationship with them. And so, well, yeah, people pay their own hotels, and you gotta fix things for the kids.
Well, and it's so hard to get anyway, right?
Authorizing
Yeah.
$25,000 for free cash.
Yeah, this is great. You were in Uxbridge. You were in Uxbridge before? Yeah. You were in Uxbridge.
So,
You
my
know,
key
Kristen
point
Black?
is that.
Kristen Black.
Any decisions.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, so doesn't know Kristen Black. So I, she's on the borough. She's in Northborough. She's in Northborough, yeah.
Oh, wow.
She's the health agent.
I met her.
So I'm on.
Oh.
the hearing committee with her. So I just had a meeting with her yesterday. Yeah.
I think there's.
More than, you know, percent.
Oh, yeah.
It's considered safety.
So we're gonna be at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
You're gonna be amazed. It is like the most incredible.
Did you go already, Sam? I'd love to talk to you about it.
Okay, I think everyone did, yeah.
I'm
So, you know,
very,
I think so.
Oh, the two trips?
But then we went home.
Yeah, yeah. And cancel that trip, because I can go some research, so.
And Andrew was going.
Andrew always the one saying, that's why I say.
yeah.
No, it's fine. It's incredible.
Okay, we're all back?
Yeah, come on in, AD. Mr. Davidson.
Oh,
I'm back.
in my glory.
So are we having fun?
No, stop.
You
Coming back
know,
on, Vanessa?
this is the kind, this is the kind of thing that when you're on a board, you wish you had time to do, but you don't, because look at your agendas, you're going 5.5 hours per meeting, and you can't do this as part of it. But this, to me, this is the most fun stuff of local government, is to step back, not have an agenda item before you, and kind of talk with your colleagues about what it is that you're ultimately trying. So I do hope that you're enjoying it. So speaking of that, goal 1.3, just adopted, says, update select board meeting process and improved focus, efficiency, transparency. So let's talk about your meetings. I have to say, it really caught my eye when one of the meeting minutes that Vanessa sent to me, reading through the minutes, like 13 pages or something, and look at the start time, and look at the end time. That's a long, it's 5.5 hours, plus I understand executive session now. My experience is, and I've been doing this in some capacity for 50 years, and for a number of different communities in this state and in other states. You can't operate with a 5.5 hour meeting. You can't focus that long. You're tired. You all work full-time jobs. In some way, you work a full-time job managing 3 kids, house construction, and the other things that you do. You just can't do it. And I mean, you may be able to do it once, but it's not sustainable. So I'm just going to go through some ideas with you about structure of meetings and things that I've had experience with, or other municipal governments have. There may be other things that you've heard about that aren't on this list, and by all means bring them up. Ultimately, I think the board needs to structure itself so that you can manage within whatever you decide is reasonable. Now, some communities I work for have a structure of they won't meet later than X hour, whatever X hour is. And or they won't have a meeting longer than X hours. I would strongly suggest that you try it. Whether you just agree among the 5 of you to try it, or whether you just include that in your selectmen's policy. So that'll be part of what I'm bring up. First item obviously is plan the agenda. Plan a realistic agenda. My understanding is that you have a process with the town administrator, assistant town administrator, chair, and vice chair to look at agendas, put agendas together. I think that's not a bad idea. My experience has been, I've worked with boards where the chairman says, just do the agenda. Do the agenda, send it out, I'm good. I've had situations where I've had a vice chair and a chair and myself sit down and structure every last piece. It's not that one is right or wrong, it's what fits you best. But whichever way you do it, be realistic. Don't assume that, I'm just gonna pick this out of my hat, but don't assume that the assessor who has never spoken for less than half an hour in their lives is going to come in a 5-minute slot. It's just not going to happen. So be realistic about it. If you need to have the assessor in, slot it for the half hour or whatever they're going to take. And be realistic about it. And count up all the time slots, and if you're going to meet for not less than 4 hours, then make sure it fits in 4 hours. Secondly, create background information on every item on the agenda. That can be done in a very simple way of a 2-page paragraph description of each item, no more than 2 pages. And or it can be done with all the details, including the bid documents and everything else. I mean, you need to choose what information you need to make a decision on. You can't, you're never gonna have all the information. If you're awarding a contract, I don't know if the board awards contracts here, but if, well, you're approving your DPW union contract. Okay, so what information do you need to make a decision? Contract, the old contract, you know, a red line contract, what is it that you need? Make sure you have that information enough ahead of time. Something like a union contract, if it's a, 25-page contract and off an hour, 48 hours may not be enough to digest that. You might need that far ahead of time. And the administrator has to, work all that through. So, board is the board of the whole, everybody has to have the same information. And my personal belief is I would share that information other than executive session information. It's on the website for the agenda. There's the agenda, there's the background. Not yourself up. It's transparent, which is what you want to be. It also is a time saver because people have the same information. That information isn't likely going to generate additional questions. It's more likely going to be, there's the answer to the question I have. It's right there. As select board members, read the material. At the very least, read a 2-page summary if that's what you do. But, and I know it's hard. And if you're getting that material with only 48 hours notice, that's a lot of work to do. So between the town administrator and the board, you need to have realistic expectations of what you can digest and when you get it. Consent agendas. You have a consent agenda. You take an exception to every item on the consent agenda. It's not a consent agenda.
We did better last week.
So, the consent agenda is a great idea, and I use it. I use it in my condo association. I use it for years. But, when you have your agenda planning sessions, you have to be realistic about what goes on it. And when you have a consent agenda, or even when you don't, for example, if you're reviewing minutes, and I've done the minutes, and I have typos all over it, which I do. That's not something for discussion of the board meeting. So that's the town administrator, have the minutes corrected with the proper pronunciation, with a proper punctuation. And just approve them in the consent agenda. So that's an easy example. It's same may be true of other items. If there's something on the consent agenda, and you have a question about it, and you're reading through the material, town administrator can get your questions. So you don't have to take an exception to the consent agenda. Limit the time for meetings. So, in Reading, I had the selectmen who knocked this stuff out and left the meeting at 11 o'clock. Mid-sentence. He was gone. John had early in the morning, to go off to work in the morning. He knew his own body clock. He couldn't be at a meeting after 11 o'clock. And looked in, he literally left in the middle of the sentence. So what the board did was decided that's probably not a bad idea. So they actually, in their policy, adopted a policy of every meeting, no new agenda item will be discussed after 11 o'clock. And they had in that process what happened with the other items on the agenda. So Maybe 4 hours maximum. 4 hours maximum, given where you come from, nothing after 11 o'clock. Whatever it is, I think it's worth thinking about it and having a discussion about it. Put presenters and department heads on early in the agenda rather than later. It's nothing worse than a department head, especially if they, you know, have a 45-minute drive to 45 minutes from here. I guess it would have to be Connecticut or Rhode Island. Okay, and they're there at 10:55, which is about 11 o'clock. Oh, we'll take Fred. Yeah, I mean, that's, we're not to do that. So plan the agenda, plan it. Establish a reasonable time limit on public comment. It's usually 3 to 5 minutes. You should actually set that as a selectmen's policy, select board policy, so that you're not accused of trying to shut somebody. The policy is 3 minutes. So you should watch the clock. Each 3 minutes, that will remind them.
So what do you see as far as public comment? When we do it at the first and the end, currently, and then we let people come in during the meeting if they raise their hand and they want to talk about a specific topic. So what do you see generally as far as public comment goes?
So what I see usually is having the public comment at the beginning of the meeting. And that's really as a courtesy to resident who wants to come in and speak, that they don't have to wait till 55 to have their 5 minutes. Put them on at the beginning. People are entitled to speak on an item that the board is making a decision on. So, you know, the board comments, board questions, public. I mean, that's the normal flow at the meeting. But 3 minutes, 5 minutes, usually in that time frame. But one public comment session should be enough. Establish a time limit for presenters when you're doing the agenda. So make sure the assessor can talk for half an hour. So you get put on the agenda. But you know, you'll have consultants coming in, you'll have staff coming in. Just understand how much time they feel they need for their presentation, and then hold to it, and then for the Q&A from the board, because you're not going to have somebody come in and present the design for Cornwall Road and not have any comment or any question. So you need to build that into the. So this isn't an issue of how long it takes into the meeting, but reduce the length of minutes. I think your council would probably advise that also. There are certain things that have to be in minutes. When the meeting started, who was there, the members of the quorum was there, who from the public was there, motions, second, vote. That's basically it. Most minutes are a little bit more than that, but I think you have that as an option, or this is an option, that's somewhere in between. And it's really got to be what the board feels most comfortable. But you might want to check the council in terms of their election. My experience is that council really wants this, what the state law requires. Now, the last one in my list, I've actually done in every community I've worked in. And I do it in with my comment. That is, have the town administrator prepare draft motions, or sworn draft motions for the board. It can be done, for example, if the town administrator is doing a 2-page summary of the meeting, it can be done in there. It can be done has a separate agenda for the board that has the motion form, which is right with my comment association. Because when you do that, the minutes are basically done. Because that's what it is. The advantage is that it gets in the motion what needs to be in the motion. So, I don't know if you've done any bonding, but when you do bonding, bond counsel will determine down to the period and below what that motion says. Very specific on it because it's part of the bond document. So, yeah, most of what you do is not that precise, but, yeah, there's certain details that you probably need. And it just makes it simple. Now, the draft, which doesn't mean that the town administrator is telling the board what to do. So when I draft them, and it's approved or not approved, I put it approved in parentheses, not approved in parentheses, so the options are there. But it really does help the flow. So those are some suggestions, and you can ignore them.
Are these a good frequency of meetings?
The frequency of meetings, in my opinion, is any more often than every other week. It's too much, except that there are emergencies that come up that you have to do. But there's a tremendous amount of work from staff and from your volunteers in putting together the background material for the job. And so if you're repeating that every week, that's really almost an unsustainable. Unless you have somebody who you just hired. Any questions?
Good comments, I think. I guess one of my frustrations is I think we spend a lot of time hearing what we already know or what we really should know. If we read the prep material in the package, we have people who come in, go through the presentation that we've seen in the packet beforehand. So I guess my interest is sort of getting to the bottom line quickly, saying, okay, here's presenter X, department head Y or whatever. What do you need? What's the important thing here? Give me the 3-minute summary. And then let's move forward if people have questions or whatever. So if we've got the material
So
beforehand.
if the
we can
background
be prepared.
material goes to the residents, if it's posted, I
Yeah.
agree with you,
Yeah.
because they already have all that information.
Yeah. the residents
If you
get-
don't, sometimes you need to do the presentation because you have another audience there.
But that's in the packet. So the residents, if they want to know, it's there, and I guess I don't feel the need to educate the residents who haven't bothered to look at the packet, I guess.
I think we tend to, I mean, it's a transparency issue.
Yeah, right.
And transparency is really a perception. Because there's no definition of transparency is that it's exactly this. So it's the perception by your residents and by yourselves that gives us transparent. So, yeah,
But
somewhere,
I'm very comfortable. If somebody comes to me and asks a question, say, well, I don't know what's going on there. I can say, look at the information packet for the meeting on this date. There's the full presentation from the director or whatever. All the background information right there. It's available to you and anybody else in the public. I'm not as eager to spend the time in the meetings going through that 20-page PowerPoint presentation. We sit through things like the auditor's report and the OPEB report and whatever, which is interesting if you want to go look at it, but it's a lot of time to spend in a public meeting or something.
and bottom line, whether you choose to do any of these or none of them is really up to the board.
Where were you doing?
Completely within your
most of
discretion.
these?
A lot of it,
They put together a great packet
Mhm.
with details in it, and these 5 are very detailed people, and everybody here reads that packet, does their homework over the weekend in front. We meet twice a month. But if you go back to the meetings that we looked at, 5:31 and 6:14, that were both 5-hour meetings, there was a lot on those agendas, and there was controversial stuff on those agendas. And the public had a lot to say about some of those things, and that's what I think kind of drug out those two more than, and so we did put a lot on those, so I think that is the main thing to work on, is really trying to time what we think that agenda looks like, which is hard to do, but we can try, right? Because it was hard to sit through those 5.5 hour meetings.
Well, and then the next day, it was horrible.
Works for
Because
me. It's like,
all of you, I'm sure, are like me and most other people, is you don't all of a sudden go from 100 miles an hour to 0. So you all live locally, and so it's not a long enough drive for you to decompress on the drive home. So you're up thinking about it, like she said.
he's
Yes,
not
sir,
local,
wonder-
she's not local, I don't think, right? So we are being
Well,
rather inconsiderate to others.
And after a 5.5 hour meeting, I've got to live a lot further away to decompress.
Otherwise,
So,
you just- you
I
just
will
did it
say,
here.
you know, lots of times you set an agenda and you don't think some of the discussions that are gonna take place, you know? There was lots of times that we would talk before the meeting, how long do you think this is gonna be? And again, things that you never thought would have led to any length of discussion, 45 minutes later, you're still on that topic. So it is relatively challenging to try to set that agenda to take care of the business. And again, it's not always easy to do because you can't always control what,
Sure.
we're 5 members and each one of us have a right to speak.
Well,
So
and
it's
don't
hard
take
to-
anything I've said as a criticism.
I don't
I
at all.
just, I feel for you for having gone through
Yeah,
the
believe me.
meetings, and I've done it myself. I mean,
I'll give you for example, when I first got on the board, there was what, 3 items on the agenda, and if we weren't out of the townhouse by 8:30, we had a member that was packing up the ready to leave anyway. So, I mean, I've kind of gone from both ends of the spectrum. I think some of the issues that have transpired to COVID through a lot of things, again, more focus on meetings than there was in the past. Not that that's an excuse, we had a full agenda, so there's no question.
So one of the things to look at is to look at your agendas and see if the board really needs to deal with all of those stuff. And I don't know, because I mean, I don't want to judge everything by one long meeting myself. But, you know, the board doesn't need to deal with everything under the sun if asked. There's certain things that you do need to do. So if the discretionary things are taking up so much time that you're not able to get to the essential things, then there's something wrong with the priority set. And the advantage to having, you know, chair and vice chair sit down and look at the agenda for the town administrator, the assistant town administrator, it just broadens your knowledge base as to what you might expect on that agenda. Oh, we're talking about sidewalks here. Are people going to come in and wave banners and say, hooray, we want our sidewalk? Or people are going to say, I don't want any sidewalks because I don't want to have to shovel my that sidewalk. And I've heard both. So it just gives you a broader base of, you know, sort of what to expect, because Mark or Vanessa will know, you know, who's been calling town hall, wanting to know about sidewalks and, you know, are they pro or con? Not that they shouldn't speak, but just an idea of what to expect.
And to be clear, and I think that's the public comment that, you know, if we agree to do it once, not twice, and not during the meeting. The public comment needs to be focused on the agenda item for that night.
Well, I would suggest that it be limited to any item that's not on the agenda, because if it is on the agenda, they'll have an opportunity to speak.
Oh, so you're saying not
Not
on the
on the
agenda.
agenda.
Okay.
Not
All
on the
right, I
agenda.
said on the agenda, that's why I said, okay.
An
So,
item not on the agenda and that you hear them only. It's a listening opportunity, it's not a debating opportunity. And so it's unreasonable for the residents expect the board to react because they've just heard it. And staff hasn't had a chance to, you know, give you any information on whatever it is.
It's not on the agenda, exactly.
And there's a time limit. Time.
And you can use the time.
On the current
In a nice
policy,
way.
isn't there, the current, public comment policy, isn't there 3 minutes? Why does that stick in my head? That's
School committees.
No,
I have to go back and take a look.
I think there was something, Chelsea, because I think that was one of the things Dan wanted on the policy. Was,
3 minutes is a frequent.
I could be
I've
wrong,
seen
you have
3
to look
minutes
it
in
out, but I 3 minutes is sticking in my head. At least it was discussed at the time when the policy was put in place.
And I've had, this is different, you know, scale, but I've done nothing with the Fort Lauderdale City Council meetings, and they actually have a clock. And somebody hits the clock, it's in the city clerk, hits the clock when you start speaking, and the chairman, the mayor will hit the gavel and say,
Trap door at the podium.
but not in, I mean, not in the adversarial way, just in a nice way. So, have a long agenda, and we've got.
What do you, if you have some agenda items, ceremonial sometimes of works for people, that there's some importance to that. And let's take up time, like I know in one of the issues that's always raised about the annual town meeting, it's 45 minutes. Purely ceremonial stuff. You have any thoughts based on your experience? If you were to just do all business all the time, strictly, you would have a shorter meeting, but you would lose some of the stuff.
Right. I think it really depends on the community. and what the expectation is. I've seen communities that don't do any of the ceremonies. And I've seen communities that will take 45 minutes to get a meeting and do the ceremonies. So, I mean, part of it may be a situation of spreading it around so that you don't have, you know, in one meeting, 10 ceremonial items, so next meeting you don't have one. And then the rest of it being not every member of the board, for example, should be to comment on, you know, somebody's whatever celebration. So maybe one member of the board is the day before that. And the other is if you have things like a proclamation or something that will take a while to read, you don't necessarily need to read it. Say, we've got a proclamation for. You don't need to read Fred's resume. So I think there are ways that you can do it, you know. Sometimes you'll have things that are sort of amorphous that you don't know what to do with it. Read a certificate. And just, you know, certificate and shake that hands. We had a, in Reading, when we hired a police officer, firefighter, academy. That was like through that. I don't know.
Peter, can I just go back? I was incorrect. It's actually the chair sets the limitations. I have the public comment policy. On participation in public meetings. It's the chair, all the chairs set the time limitations and maintain order. It's important that the board also allows themselves enough time to conduct their official town business. And, yeah.
What I would suggest is that it be set in board policy, or if the chair is going to do it, then the chair should announce it every single week.
I think it should be policy and not follow the chair.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't depend on who's chair.
Yep.
You know.
Should be a policy.
And then, you know, somebody should just, you know, start their iPhone for 3 minutes or whatever it is. So they I don't think you need the football. Yeah, they do need it.
What about board and committee interviews? So like if we have something that we appoint, sometimes we have 5 interviews to there. We have a way to streamline that.
Sure, I do.
We have some of the consent agenda.
They're already
We
appointed.
were on another committee, yeah, and so before.
Well, that's not 42. Maybe that's only to Shopsy.
But
Yeah,
he's
there's a
serving,
consent.
You know.
Right.
On consent. so I'm
Right.
saying, so
Yeah.
maybe-
Yeah.
and-
But he
Somebody
wasn't
that
new
knows
to a board or committee.
wasn't
We-
really serving the town.
we knew him.
Total, all right, so I
Yes.
get that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do it as part of the consent agenda. More broadly, you know, Southborough is like most communities. July 1 is the beginning of a lot of
Yeah.
stuff, right? Everybody's stuff. So a 2-member subcommittee, 2 members of the board subcommittee, which you will have to post meetings, you will have to take minutes, go out and do all the interviewing, find out who wants to be reappointed, just deal with all that. And I can board of selectmen with a package that says, here's who we recommend to be appointed or reappointed.
That's a
And
consent.
anybody can take any name or any position off, just like a consent agenda, otherwise the whole slate.
So
We did that.
Yeah, we
right,
did
so
that.
I more mean
This is for
for
new
new,
people.
Brand new person, never been on.
or a
committee.
new committee that we're sitting,
Oh,
or
oh,
something
oh.
like, that's a better example, where you would have multiple people for the same
But
committee.
it's during the year. I think the annual process for it's similar to what you
Yeah,
described.
right.
But it's during the year when we have vacancies, or as Chelsea said, when we create a new committee.
Same committee.
And 2 persons.
So the committee,
Okay,
then we need 5 members of a community center committee or whatever. Okay, everybody applies, they review them and make a recommendation.
Back to the board, back to the entire board,
I'm sorry?
back to the entire board.
Mhm.
Works for me.
That what
I
you
think-
guys go for this?
I think that's good, other than sometimes it's nice when it's somebody that's never served, to meet them, to thank them, to bring them in. And if that, this is the role of the board at 1 of 5, I will miss that piece in being able to thank someone, you know, find out why they're interested in serving. And in some cases, we've had people that actually ended up serving on another committee because they were better suited.
Well, and that's something that a 2-member committee can do, is, you know what, we don't have any slots open for non-incumbents on advisory, but have you thought of being on the capital committee?
And just, I will miss the personal opportunity
Of course you
to
do.
welcome somebody, to thank them publicly for anybody.
but
that's
it'll be
watching.
public meeting, so you could be that, you could be on the board reps if you wanted to.
So I wish I could take you back to probably about 1990 in Reading, where
Wish I could say it
Where the
every
board-
time.
the board of selectmen
Before you were born.
did the interviews with all
Yeah.
committee members. And we had a gentleman who was retired military who decided that this was his 45 minutes. of fame. Literally 45. And the chairman did everything but pull the fire alarm to try to move the gentleman on, and he was not.
I mean, I'm open to what the board wants to do. I personally will miss that introduction piece of welcoming people publicly that they have to serve, but again,
I'll miss some of that too, but I won't miss the time that we spent. So,
I think if it's one-offs, it's not. I just remember one specific meeting where we had like 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah.
And it was like by the time we actually got to the rest of the agenda, I think it was
Right.
already over an hour in. And so I think, I don't know, I think we could try it.
Yeah.
And
One thing is just like, see some of the consolidated things that also mean stuff. I think that's an example where it goes a little bit better. I am interested in trying some of these things. And sort of chip away at that.
No one of these things is gonna take
No.
5.5 hour meeting, make it into a 3 hour.
And Adrian, I'm not against it, I'm
I
gonna
understand.
miss that piece. that's
Yeah.
all. That's okay.
But you know, when your meetings used to be done by 8, you could maybe take 1 or 2 of those and add
There you
them.
go,
Yeah.
there you go.
We have that too.
It's been a long time since they were 8.
Well, you know, society has become much more complex and local government has become much more complex and your roles are much more complex.
And the public has gotten much more involved in all
Yeah.
that stuff.
We also expanded our select board, which was more selectmen from 3 to 5 a few years ago too. And I actually talked to a former selectman, select person today, and he said, you guys are driving me crazy. You know, you talk too much, you know, everybody's talking it. You don't need to have everybody talk about everything. So he actually said kind of what you said too in more way. So with 5, you know, you got 40% more than what you had before. So that does it.
I'm flattered with you also.
You have to see it's not anymore.
But I also think that Zoom didn't help with that,
No.
right? Because you don't want anybody to feel like they missed out on their airtime on, like, it's harder, I think. I think it's easier in person because you can just jump in and not have to be as structured about going on.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know that there's an answer to that. I love it.
I do too.
I love this bird here.
Yeah.
Because it just, it expands the universe of people who can participate.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I'm just saying, I think that it's harder to make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak equally. And so I think we've had chairs that have been very cognizant of that. And so go around and you don't need to do that every time, but I think it's harder to, balance that
Yeah.
on the Zoom. But I agree with you. I love that we have this opportunity.
Part of that is we could be more disciplined. About doing our 2 minutes worth on every topic. As an offender, I don't want to do that.
I do think it's funny you say that because, you know, there are times when I think that, you know, say Andrew goes and Chelsea goes, and then Lisa, who may not have, don't mean this, you know, may not have anything to add into the discussion, says, well, you know, I just think that she feels like she has to say something. So, you know, I really agree with what Andrew and Chelsea said. I really think they've already taken my comments, and, you know, and then you feel like you've got to put
Yeah.
something
That's
together.
so true. That's
I
human
agree.
nature, you know?
You
And
know?
you just feel like you've got to say something. So
Right.
it's hard, it's gonna be hard for us to just, if it's been said and you agree with it, don't say anything.
Yep.
You know, it's hard to do.
Yeah, it
So,
is.
so that goes really to the chair. You know, and so the comment is, so we have a motion to, you know, make July 4th a national holiday. You can go Sam, Lisa, Chelsea, Andrew, or you can just say, does anybody have any comments? No comments? No. Yeah. And I don't know whether that happens at your meetings, but that's not unusual.
We all like to talk.
I think
Well,
that's fair.
I
you
mean,
all
it's-
are people who,
Yeah.
A, have the interest of the community, and you're elected officials, and so, yes, one your concern.
I don't know if it's about wanting FaceTime. I think it's more, we all feel very strongly about positions that we take and why we take them. And again,
And this group really does do its homework, so you really do have substantive things to say.
Mhm.
For the most part, so.
This group also, I mean, I've had boards that I've worked for that, you know, very much at the same line, they got to the same place, the same way, everything's fine. This group, probably as much as any, has, you know, it's, you don't take the same road to get to the same place. You know, usually the board comes to the same place, you know, again, or the majority, at least 4 of the 5, you know, if not everyone. But you all take very different paths to get there. And, you know, I know it takes time, but it is interesting to figure out how you got to where you got to. So, you know, there is value in that, but it's time consuming.
all I will say is, I think if I would be hesitant to, if someone has something to say, they should go up. And I feel very strongly about that, without a time limit. I understand the need for moving meetings along, but, you know, we are all elected. We can all sit here, we are one of five, and there's not one of us that has more of an opinion than the others. So that would be my only thing I would hesitate on. I'm all for moving things along, and if you don't have something to say, that's great. If you do, you know, I think every member here has a right to speak.
Well, I didn't mean to suggest that not every board member who has something to say on a particular topic should be able to say it. I think to avoid the example Mark used, where the chair is specifically calling on each board member, they sort of feel like I say something, as opposed to calling on the board generally and saying, does anybody have any comment?
At least, I think, at least in my brief experience on the board, I think it's always been the case that people have the opportunity to express their opinion.
No, I think so too.
It's not always been the case in the distant past, but I think that it's, again, something that is important.
It is.
Fairly effective job.
And that's the case I made, Sam, is I, if it's gonna make the meeting 15 minutes
Yeah.
longer to hear what somebody's got to say, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to make sure that no one feels they don't have the opportunity to express how they feel. That's all.
Okay, so my next question is, speaking of agendas, do we want to put this on the agenda for July 12th? I think I've got 13 things listed that you suggested. We could put them 1 to 13, go through real quick. I think we're doing already majorities. I don't think this will take long.
Yeah.
To go through and make a
Yeah.
decision what we need to do.
Yeah.
Okay. You're talking about the things we just discussed right here, or?
The things that Pete has discussed with us as far as suggestions to improve the efficiency of our SB meetings going forward.
On the agenda and come into the meeting with an opinion to go through and
Okay.
not debate
And then
it.
another thing you can do is just, someone probably most of it, aspirational goal, you know, or 4 hours. something.
That's one of the things here.
All
So
right.
I think you put together a list, get it out well before Tuesday, so you can think about it and check what you want. If you want it 4, put 4. If you want 3.5, whatever you want to put, right? Well, so we decide on the time, no later than whatever, how many hours, I think that's important. And see if we could, because again, I think we're doing a lot of these already. I don't think it's gonna take that.
Make at least a working decision, and then if it doesn't work, do something.
Acceptance, good as well.
So I did have some other observations, again, from my very limited experience in Southborough, but I thought I'd share those with you. One of the items is in all of my work in local government, I've always seen the town administrator, town manager as a member of management team. We're selectmen as CEOs, but I would view myself and the boards I work for view me as part of that process and part of that team. So I think when, we did the goal setting was the 5 members of the board of selectmen. What I would have done is a little bit different process, asked the administrator also to provide input. Maybe not vote on it, but maybe provide input into the list. So you have an extraordinarily experienced town administrator and assistant town administrator. Sometimes you have a lot of experience here, not so much here because that person wants to become town administrators. So they're learning, so they may go on to another community in a couple of years. Southborough has both. And so I advise you to fully utilize the knowledge they have, the experience they have. When you have a board that has this short tenure on the board, as you have here, that's your institution, huh? So. I also, and I think I mentioned this to each one of you separately, I would advise you to think about creating a mission statement and a value statement for the town. Really, I would focus on the value statement more than the mission. It's the values that you put forward and lead by example in the community that make you leaders in the community. And there's probably not a lot of disagreement among all of you, just having spoken to you fairly briefly, but it's good to have it stated. It's good to have it written down. So it's not necessarily a long process, and you know, you can do sort of a process like this. You can look at other examples, send you the Reading website as a place where they've modified them over time, so since I've been there, but they have a written vision statement. I think that's worthwhile. Just a reminder that the select board is a policymaking board. It's not an administrative board. It's not operating, you don't have operating responsibilities that goes on that side of the house. And again, you have very talented people who have to do that, not only among these people, but I understand among some of the senior staff that you have. And so you just hold them accountable for what you want, hold them accountable for doing. So one of the things that I've noticed just looking through some of the material that Vanessa had given me before, you have a lot of boards, committees, and commissions. I mean, a lot. And I just heard something tonight that caused me more concerned that all those are going to have to be on hybrid meetings now. So you're going to have to provide IT support for it. This is, I believe, more than anybody else in using our residents for the benefit of our community. And people put in a lot of time and are very creative and a lot of good things to do. But I would suggest looking at all the boards, committees, and commissions. And if you have some that are inactive or don't have members, then maybe they might need it. Probably provided a valuable service at one time. But you know, it's a hard thing to do, but rescind. Evaluate community committees for duplication. People doing pretty much the same thing, and maybe it ought to be one body instead of two. Things like it could be or it might not be. Trails committee, an open space committee. No, they're doing something really similar, so maybe it ought to be one body instead of others. Yeah, having a hard
Did you
time
pick
getting
that
one.
one on purpose because you know we have both?
I'm sorry.
Did you pick that one on purpose because you know we have both?
And I don't know anything about them, and maybe they are significantly different. And in Reading, we had a trails committee that was actually going out and building trails. They were the laborer who was building trails. So it's a little bit different than that and open space planning committee. But sometimes that's not the case. Are you having a hard time getting volunteers? Just general. You're having a hard time filling this position. Do you have residents who are on 4 different committees? That's a measure that you're stretching it to that.
So do you think, Peter, on that one, that outreach, as we talked about different ways of reaching the public might enhance getting new people to want to apply, want to serve.
Yeah, my, you know what, I think the best way of doing that though is remember the board of selectmen or the existing committee recruit. Going out and talking to people, you know, wherever they are, whether it's you know, Little League Park or, you know, PTO meeting or at the dump, the transfer station, you know, wherever they are. But that's much more effective because people are much more likely to say yes. You know, when Chelsea says, you know, have this new committee looking at a community center. I know you're an architect, you know, you'd be great for it. That sort of thing. People, you wouldn't say no to Chelsea anyway. People would have a harder time saying no to that than just some blind ad that's on the, you know, the bulletin board.
Fair
Establish sunset provisions for some committees. I had a solid waste committee. Wasn't doing anything because we had sort of mainstreamed the recycling program that they were created to do. And they were looking for things to do, but they didn't want to do it. So, you know, they got reappointed, did nothing, and, you know, that was just kind of what happened. So, after that, I had suggested to the board of selectmen that they put a sunset clause 5 years, and, you know, then we'll reevaluate it, but if the board doesn't do anything, it goes. So that's an easier way than sitting there firing 5 residents who've been.
You did that just for that one committee.
I did, no, we did it for all the committees, any committees that the board had created since then. And they also used a lot of ad hoc committees. And had our policy was written, ad hoc committee couldn't be longer than 2 years. So automatically went out of business December 31st of, you know, 2 years later. And, you know, for some things, you know, we had ad hoc committees that were continued because they weren't quite done with the work too, but for a lot of stuff. And so the things I've sort of heard, you know, discussion about in ad hoc. And then the last item I had is to make sure that you onboard and train, and I know that was in one of the slides. The volunteers that you have. And that's true for the select board too. When the new member of the board of selectmen, select board is elected, there should be a sort of a full onboarding process. So what do they need to know? No, you're elected, you're expected, you can meet that night and you're expected to take action on stuff. You know, what do you do?
And I think that's a particularly relevant point. We've had several new committees in the last year or so that I've sat in on as they got started. And there's great confusion in terms of just how you run the meeting, things like open meeting law. And I think that we should be able to put together a 1-page summary. Here are the things, here's the process steps, here's what you do, here's how you think motions, you get roll call votes for these kind of things. And as I sit in on some of those, people ask me, what do we do now? And stuff, and it should be easy to write down. And I think that makes us a lot more in line with what the various legal requirements are for meetings and votes and so forth. I don't think anybody's had a problem with that necessarily. Only because no big issues at the present. I think gaps in the procedures here. But, so it's easy to fix the new committees.
I'd like to take it one step further. We put people on boards and committees all the time and don't provide them any training whatsoever. They don't have any background in the things we put them on, and we expect them to just go and do.
Well,
Even our permitting boards,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I think we fail them by not providing them what they need to be successful. And I think
How many boards, we're serious in terms of what
Right,
we
it
take
just-
action on,
In general,
but there are outside organizations that do training. ZBA, Conscom has a lot of training, it's a very good training.
Well, we should be providing that to them
Yes.
and letting them know that that's available.
Or even requiring. it.
Exactly.
ZBA, I have zero training. Some would suggest. I
Now you
still
tell
don't have
us.
training.
Now you know.
But I think it plays out with everything that we do. You know, we welcome people in and we say,
Yeah.
great, thank you for serving. There you go. Go get sworn and see you later. And I think
Deep into
it's
the pool.
right. And I think we should find a way to make them more successful by giving them, again, maybe there's so much online stuff now, even if it's requiring them to go to an open meeting law training, to, you know, the town clerk is very good about doing them here in town, you know, making it a requirement. I went to the last one, it was a handful. I think 12 or 16 was the number,
Right.
which, again, it's just something that it starts from the top, it starts from us. And again, our
Well,
goal-
that's one of your goals, right? And one of the goals was to do training.
we just want to make sure that people are successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is, business of government is serious, it's serious to the way that communities function. So let's take it seriously.
And again, they want to be successful, but we also want to protect ourselves from liability.
Agreed.
Because in this day and age, there are people looking over their shoulder all the time. And we need to be sure that we follow the various legal requirements for procedure minutes and those kind of things. The people, it's not that people don't want it, but people just are surprisingly uninformed about what's required. So it's easy to fix, I think.
And then wanting new people to come and serve instead of, like you say, more people on one board committee. Again, I think the training would help with that as well.
Any other questions?
No, but I want to go back to something, and now that I think about, I'm looking at you, because my gosh, if this bill goes through the way you read it, and you have to have, everybody has to do a hybrid meeting, every single meeting. You're gonna have to have one of these at every single meeting that anybody ever has, and it's gotta get set up. So, I mean, the bill hadn't passed yet, maybe
You
the
have to
Senate
get
will
rid
wipe
of
it
a
out.
dozen committees.
Yeah, so maybe the Senate with conference, when they sit down and, you know, maybe they'll get it wiped out, but, oh, somebody needs to call that guy that put this amendment in and make sure he understands what the consequence. Here's one thing for us.
It's an unfunded mandate, is what that will turn into.
Agreed. And that's the concern there for MMA, Kathy, is that for some larger cities, I mean, it's a huge financial burden they're gonna potentially putting on that. We're fortunate that we have the hours, you know, we already purchased them, but
Smaller towns, actually, not everybody has a budget for an hour, or the technology support to
so
make it work.
fingers crossed, you know, just recommending that people reach out to their legislators and let them know that this is not the path. Remote meeting is good, but
If we only have letters.
I know. It doesn't hurt to reach out to, you know, Senator Eldridge, you know.
Yeah, time to please go get this thing out of the door, you know?
I'm speaking of someone who's on tomorrow.
There you go, Andy. Thank you on behalf of the board. Please do. Let them
You're
know.
gonna see him tomorrow,
No, it's talking to someone else and stuff.
so will you mention that we don't think they quite thought through what this means to,
Yes, I'll mention that.
especially the smaller committees, the little ones that, I mean,
Continuing Zoom is one thing, but hybrid is a whole,
I mean, our IT guys are gonna spend all the time on doing this stuff, period.
I agree. Along
Did you see the look on his
yeah, this is
face?
like a cheap or something.
I'm not stopping you.
Okay.
No seconds.
So thank you, Pete.
Thank you. It's good meeting all of you and enjoying working with you. People want to thank Vanessa, she's been my contact here as the mark for most of the time. Yeah, thank you for the work that you do and that you've done. So the deliverable here will be list of goals, and I think Vanessa's gonna look at that. I'll take a fine look at it tomorrow. And I will give you a document with my observations and my suggestions in terms of meeting us a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can just add one thing before we go. I just want to thank Vanessa for the excellent job she did in our restaurant. She truly stepped up to the plate, Vanessa, and I think publicly should be acknowledged. Great job.
Thank you very much.
And I've never really worked with Vanessa now, and I should say, Mark, it's a pleasure to work with. She was a real pleasure to work with, so I totally agree with her.
Thank you.
Okay, we got a
I'll
motion
second.
to adjourn.
I'll say.